So first up, the first part of our agenda, we're glad that we have Dr. Calvin Watts in the room, but I'm going to invite Lyle to come up and help with this part of the process. Lyle, our board chair, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm Lyle Quasim. I am currently the chair of the board. Oh, there he is. We're here this morning to do many things, and one of which is to talk to Dr. Calvin Watts. Now, I am a bureaucrat. There are many educators in here, many entrepreneurs, but I'm a bureaucrat. And in working in the bureaucracy for the state government, I've managed close to $30 billion of taxpayer money. And one of the things in the bureaucracy is that they want you to do is to manage the fund account. Now, we have programs, we have staff, we have facilities, we have all of those things, and all those things cost money. And so it is very important that people understand the financial process. Well, Dr. Watts is here to talk to us about his work at the school district, and also about issues related to the financing of that work. He's been in the news lately, and we are very, very thankful for him to come and share his concerns and issues and enlighten us directly from the source about what's happening. Dr. Watts, come on up.
Thank you.
And the way we'll work is we'll hear from Dr. Watts, and then we will entertain questions, and I will help orchestrate the questioning process of this part of our agenda.
What I'm going to share with you is a presentation that we have shared this year, and we've adjusted the state of the district to the state of our district. And it is a deliberate, intentional. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to hear me?
Yes.
It is a deliberate, intentional change in a simple word to let our community know that we are here together. This is not one person or one staff or one employee group. And I would be remiss if I did not take the opportunity to introduce you to one of our key stakeholders in Kent School District, Dr. Jewel Harmon, who serves as our Chief Accountability Officer in Kent School District and is responsible for many areas as we become leaner and not meaner in support of teaching and learning in Kent School District. And I'd like her to make herself visible, and she'll be actually supporting the work today. Dr. Jewel Harmon, please give her a hand. And Jewel and I have served alongside each other in this good, meaningful work for more than a dozen years. Actually, she was willing to uproot and transfer the family and what she knew in the East Coast. We served together in my previous district, Gwinnett County Public Schools, and now the work continues in Kent School District. With that, we have a State of our District presentation that shares, most importantly, our operational leadership. Certainly, even more importantly, it shares how we address the needs of our students, instructionally, academically, socially, and with regard to applied learning. If we're not able to get the presentation up, it certainly is available on website, but I know that we learn visually. 72% of the population does, so I wanted to make sure you had that information to provide context. I arrived a little more than 2.5 years ago. 2015-16 was my inaugural year, and as I said day one, I plan to be here for a very long time. This is home. For those who do not know, I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, born in a sleepy suburb called Bellevue when it was just that. And my parents, my dad, Calvin C. Watts, my mom, whose body is no longer with us, Patricia D. Watts, is They were visionary. They were both born and raised in the Southeast and found their way to the Pacific Northwest. That's why I was born here. I did the reverse migration. In the 90s, I began my teaching career at South Shore Middle School in Seattle Public Schools. And my friend said, you need to come to Hotlanta. And 1 year turned into 5 turned into 21. I met my wife. We have one son. Now we have 27,000 children. As I said early and often, we have one who happens to live with us, one who we claim in our taxes. That said, this work is that meaningful because when our children have our last name, is what I share with our staff from day one, we should be compelled to work and act and serve differently. Dare I say, in a better way. When I arrived, we did not have a strategic plan. That plan started with my entry plan. I asked 12 very basic questions, research-based questions. Those questions had more to do with how our community felt about Kent School District, what improvement areas needed to take place, what areas were working. What I heard loudly and clearly, we appreciated the rich diversity. We appreciate the rich diversity of our school district, which is the 11th most diverse school district in the country. Kent School District is, and the most diverse school district in the state of Washington. They also said we appreciate our technology. What I also saw at our pep rally, and I asked everyone to come day one so I could see you. Now, they thought it was for them to see me, and that was true. That was the first opportunity that I had for a standing ovation. I know that's the second one I've had in my 3 years, and I said I'm gonna remember this. Because the work is real, the struggle is real, and I said this work of teaching and learning and supporting it is harder than most people think, and I appreciate your reference to instruction, more importantly to operations, because I'm a teacher. I will always be a teacher. I just happen to teach equity and teach accountability and teach instructional, operational, and community leadership now. Always a teacher, knowing that each one of you has a different learning style and preference. And that's why the core values that now are embedded in Kent School District of equity, excellence, and community are part of our work. And equity is hard. And the best way that I learned to share simply what does equity mean is if you raise your hand, if you grew up in a household with more than one sibling, and you were not an only child, raise your hand. And if you didn't raise your hand, because I'm an only child, if you know someone who grew up in a household with more than one child, and I had two cousins who were like little sisters I never had. And as we all grew up, and they have families now, we have children, and we are now the adults sitting at the adult table, and our children and grandchildren are sitting at the children's table. And I used to wonder, why do they get to drink coffee at age 13? I had to wait till 16 to drink coffee. Well, their needs are different. They're getting it sooner, they're getting more. No, their needs change, context change. That's why equity is so hard. Excellence, the standard for us, means that every student, each and every student must be proficient. However, growth, as we'll see, is the only area that we have control over. If each of you were running a race, how many of you ran track in, okay. How many of you did any activity, whether it was blinking your eyes or swimming or tennis, anything, and you had to compete against someone, I guarantee wherever you started, someone was going to finish at a different rate, either before or after. No Child Left Behind put us in a different space. We were measured by how our students finished. The problem is we were measured with one finish line and one starting line, and we know that not everyone started at the same point in starting line. ESSA is growth, it is progress, and what I appreciate about Every Student Succeeds Act is that we are now measured in 3 years, not just 1 year, 3 years. How do we grow? Because improvement is all that we can and have control over. Continuous quality improvement is a component of Kent School District. We can always be better. So raise your hand if you want to be better. I do every day. Raise your hand if you are willing to do everything that it takes every day with the fidelity of implementation that it takes to get better. Okay, I see fewer hands. Raise your hand if you promise to do that every day and you are promised to be held accountable if and when you do not do what is supposed to be done to the fidelity that needs to be done. Yeah, most people don't ask themselves that. That's why our work is so difficult. So I'm here to help support and help hold accountable the state of our district. Very simply, pictures tell 1,000 words. 42 schools, 28 elementary, 6 middle, 4 comprehensive high schools. We have 3 academies to support students who have varying needs. 4,000, a little more than 4,000 volunteers, a little more than 3,000 teachers and staff. These are the children my wife and I have. One of those is in the Watts household. Our board members, 5. Elected officials, their role is simple, not easy, to provide advocacy, direction, vision for the organization, to support our work, to give the orders of the why we do what we do, and the what that we are supposed to do, that we agree upon as a board superintendent governance team. My role is to take care of, through the work and support of our team, of the how. These are our 3 core values we did not have before I arrived. We landed on these 3 because we believe that if equity is what we say we're going to do, we have a race and equity policy. We are one of 5 school districts in the state of Washington who are implementing our equity warrior work, meaning that resources and opportunities and access must be granted based on individual need. That's why, again, it is so difficult. Excellence is that standard. Remember, the finish line doesn't change. Graduation, that's the beginning of our measurement of success. I get to shake the hands of 1,600 graduates every year. I look forward to that. The reality is, if our mission says success, preparing all students for their futures, when they walk away and they're not doing what we expect them to do, are we successful? Our measurement of success as an organization begins when they leave us. We know we can't do this by ourselves. We look around. Community. Community means that we are common belief, common goals, and we're unified in that goal, that effort. So a number of our students, and I shared with you the data that suggests our diversity. You see, we reflect the world. Socioeconomic diversity, linguistic diversity, race, ethnicity, more than 135 languages spoken. Whenever we communicate with our community, that's one of our goals. We translate in 5 to 6 languages. Barriers are removed. How many of you walked to school uphill both ways in the snow? I heard those stories. I tried it. It didn't really work. But I believe my parents to this day. There are buses that transport our students because some live in, as diverse as our district is, it is geographically diverse. Our son, I'll give you a side note, he is our STEM child, loves everything science. He was amazed, Dad, I learned from kindergarten to 6th grade until we moved here that freezing precipitation starts at 32 degrees. However, in Kent, because our lowest level is 12 feet above sea level, highest level about 700 feet above sea level, it actually snows at our house on one side of the street at 36 degrees. True story. That amazes him. It amazes me. Diversity doesn't stop. 10,000 of our students ride a bus every day. If I could change the definition, the title of a school bus driver, I would change his title to Director of First Impressions. Our son rode the bus every day and talked about how important it was to hear a hello or how was your weekend. 45.7% of our families qualify for free reduced price meals. Now, what does that tell you typically? It's an indicator of poverty. Some would say that's an indicator of learning. I do not say that. So this is an indicator of perhaps how much money may be in a family's bank account. It may impact what or how they eat, but it does not impact how they learn. And that is how we have to focus now on KSD 2.0, which is a focus on learning, teaching and learning with an emphasis on learning. Would you also be surprised that given the growth that's taken place in this Pacific Northwest region, 45.7. Guess what our free reduced price meal percentage was 2.5 years ago? Anyone want to take a guess? Audience participation. Shout it out. Some say lower.
53.
Some say 53, right? Thank you. Anyone else? One more. Lower or higher than 53? Higher. It was actually 52%. 52% of our families qualify. It is lower. That is not normal. Now, we know why, because families who are moving us from the world, from the region, they're coming to us with resources that perhaps they didn't have, and our free reduced price meal eligibility has decreased. Yes.
Do you have a mobility percentage?
Yes, we do. And I can tell you, I don't want to quote that off the research. I know it's double digits, but I will make sure we have that number. Thank you. Mobility, and just so you know, the rate of students, mobility measures those who, when they enroll throughout the year, 180 days of attendance, what percentage of those families actually withdraw from our school district. And as mobile as there are some areas I know, so on average, while there may be an average, and I'll get that to you, some of our areas in our school district are more mobile than others, as you might imagine. Excellence, our standard. You see examples of students. These are but a few students who are excelling in classroom, in civic leadership, in philanthropy, in arts, teachers. We have 9 employee groups in Kent School District. We have 8 bargaining units. These represent one of 2 employees who really actually exist in Kent School District. Those 2 employees, those types, you're either providing direct instruction to our students in the classroom, or you're providing support and service to those who provide direct instruction. I'm in that second group. Dr. Harmon's in that second group. Our teachers, support staff, whether it's our regional teacher of the year, Denisha Sacedo, athletic director on the field, on the court, in the library, or providing service and safety to all of our students. Mr. Angelides spent time on the continent of Africa, spent time on the continent of Europe, joined us as a basketball player and a math teacher, and he mentors students in the morning. He helps them solve problems, and in his mind and his message, he asks his students to help me meet you where you are. And that's a perfect example of what equity leadership means. We have schools that have been recognized by the state nationally for performance, academically, and applied learning. Examples of our community, cultural ambassadors. As richly diverse as our community is, we need thought leaders, thought partners, opinion leaders in our communities who can help us engage our community. Some of you who may have been a part of, most recently, our community conversations. That's our new reality of communication. We can no longer expect families to come to the board office and listen. We must now connect and engage, and I've said this for some time, we are making this a reality. I tell people, sometimes situations have to occur that force us, compel us to act differently, and we are there. We can choose not to, but I know what the consequences would be. And there are going to be consequences, there are going to be results regardless. We want to make sure that the desired results, we have families who are coming to us not necessarily knowing or understanding what school means in this country or in this region, or in Kent School District. Parent Academy for Student Achievement provides that insight. And our volunteers. We have increased, obviously, the accountability, opportunities, and access for our volunteers to support this work. See examples of corporations and partnerships that we have within our community, more than 600. Before I arrived, there were 7 strategic goals. The board and I worked together, and I asked and shared with them that most organizations have no more than 5. Why? Because you can't measure and monitor any more than that adequately. So we condensed, we honored the past, 5,000 conversations, community conversations, and we recognized that the first 4 among equals, first had to do with student success. That's goal 1. Second, how to connect and engage with our community. That's goal 2. 3, systems and structures have to be in place, operating at high levels. We are living proof of what can happen when those systems and structures have not been in place, particularly with regard to our finances. Goal 3 is organizational effectiveness, creating those systems that can operate effectively over time. We know that we cannot do this by ourselves. We have a goal that is aligned with Goal 4. And an objective is to make sure that we not only attract, we not only recruit, we hire, we develop, and we retain a premier workforce, a diverse and premier workforce, and define diverse as, to the extent that we can, a staff that reflects the community we serve. Remember what I said, we are the 11th most diverse student group population in the country. We're not quite there with regard to our staff, and I take no comfort in that. We are more similar to the 15,000 school districts in this country. Our goal is to make sure that we continue these efforts. I'm going to move even at a faster pace to share with you, and also to provide Dr. Harlan an opportunity to share some additional contextual information. But this is why we're working on our budget. Our budget is not simply the end goal. Yes, it is important. We cannot operate in a budget deficit. We're not the federal government. We can't print money. Our money comes from the students who enroll every year. And when they show up, we make sure they're accounted for. When they're not accounted for, when those systems aren't in place, however, that's where budget deficits are part of a problem, and our budget deficits grow. You heard also from our resident bureaucrat, and I will say this, if we aren't able to make sure these systems, and we're seeing now a light at the end of the tunnel. This is my third year. When I tell people this is my third year, finishing my third year, and I tell people this is my third budget cycle, right? Because people have said that, and I quote, and I accept responsibility. Now I also want to make sure that the truth is told. So I've heard that Dr. Watts came in and took $27 million. My Ford Focus, my trunk is not that big. And in all honesty, I understand why people are upset. And this goes into part of this telling the truth. It would make more sense to people. They would understand, because most people don't understand ed funding. And there are 49 other ways to conduct ed funding. In Washington State, it's complex, and in some cases, complicated. So it does seem like the money just went somewhere. The money didn't go anywhere that it wasn't supposed to. It's just like the money that you spend, if you're not keeping track of it, over time, investments that are made, and if they're made in people, raise your hand if you think you're valuable. Raise your hand, keep your hand up if you think you're invaluable. Raise your hand if you think you're expensive. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the $6 million woman or man or the dog. I remember. But in all honesty, our staff, our amazing staff, account for 85% for every dollar that is spent in Kent School District. We make investments. That initial investment is the least investment that we'll make, because every year that increases. So why are we talking about our budget? We're talking about our budget so that we can have resources to allocate to our schools. Every Student Succeeds Act. Now again, I take no comfort nor pride in saying that of the largest school districts in the state, we're the only school district where not one of our traditional comprehensive schools were identified in need of comprehensive support. Now, comprehensive support is identified as the most intensive support, where the needs are greatest. Our schools probably who are recognized in need of comprehensive support, that's iGrad, it's our recovery drop-in program, and Kent Phoenix Academy, our re-engagement program. But we do have work ahead of us. 18 of our schools were identified in need of targeted support, and that is the primary support, either based on content area or student group. Now, for this audience, and again, every day I look in the mirror, I am glad to know that there are colleagues who look like me in the superintendency. When I arrived, in terms of gender and race, if any African-American male wanted to talk to someone in the state of Washington about what it's like to be a superintendent in the state of Washington, if they didn't live with me, there was only one African-American male in the state who had that opportunity every day. And now Dr. David Patno, and we are critical friends. And again, just because I look like you, it doesn't mean that I'm not your advocate. But what I'm telling you is this. And we had this conversation at an ambassador at University of Washington board meeting yesterday. It is true, I don't have to look like you to be your advocate. However, if I don't see images of me, how do I know that I can be me? And I grew up here. At the time where I grew up, and I went 3,000 miles away to Howard University. And I graduated from Howard University, spent a year at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, a domestic exchange program. And my parents lived abroad, and my parents said, you need to learn how to interact with the world. Sit around the table with people who don't look like you, don't think like you. And you'll be a better person. And wherever you serve will be better as a result. We have to be better. And I'm going to share with you what that means. There are 9 indicators for success in ESSA. Long story short, by level, proficiency, meaning what standard we are reaching, growth, how far we move along a continuum, English language learner progress. We have to make sure our students who are multilingual, that's a strength. However, we look at it sometimes as a deficiency. But we have to make sure we are addressing their needs each and every day. And these green school quality student success indicators have to do with access and opportunity. Opportunity to teach, opportunity to learn. The assumption is if I'm at school, I should be learning. That same assumption can be applied. If I'm not at school, guess what? There's no assurance that I'm learning. So attendance matters. This is a slide that I want you to pay close attention to as we think about all of our students. Hear me when I say, when I was a 6th grade teacher of students in South Shore Middle School, no one had to teach me to think and love and care for a young girl who had just arrived from Cambodia and family. No one had to teach me how to care for her or address her needs. It starts with relationships. We have schools, and I'll let you read for those who can't see. We have elementary schools. We have 6 middle schools. Now, we have some work to do in middle school, and I think there are some factors that attribute to that. 2 elementary schools. These are the student groups that are identified, and what we were able to share with you today and want to share with you as we filter the schools who've been identified for targeted support where our Black African American student groups are identified, at least once. So out of 42 schools, doesn't mean that the other schools are getting the work done perfectly. It means that there's an area for growth. And we're identifying these areas right now. Dr. Harmon, we are working on a continuous improvement system that will provide support. That's where equity comes in. Not more, but supports that address the individual needs of our schools. And this is why we do what we do. So when the student walks off the stage and celebrates, can we truly say we are successfully preparing all students for their future? That is the answer to the question we have to ask every time a student walks across. Our community conversations, our last of 4 for this round, is on the 24th. We've got approximately 60, anywhere between 50 and 60 people coming to ask questions, to share concerns, to wonder why we aren't just simply talking about the budget. And I understand all of those concerns. At the same time, we're talking about the budget. Why? Because we're not a fiscal agency, ladies and gentlemen. We're not an employment agency. We're not a transportation service industry. We're not a nutrition service. Those factors, however, impact our work. But our goal is teaching and learning with an emphasis on learning. And our questions that we do ask have to do with student performance. This is our budget. General fund revenue, part of our budget. State, local, as well as federal funds support our needs. 20% of our resources come from the state. Those are levy dollars and bond dollars. We are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. These are our expenditures. It's a simple formula, ladies and gentlemen, just like our home budgets. R greater than E. That's our formula. R stands for revenue. E stands for expenditures. Revenue should always exceed expenditures. But for the last 5 fiscal years, our expenditures have been exceeding our revenue. We've been operating technically with an operational deficit, meaning our beginning fund balance over the last 5 years ended lower, or excuse me, our ending fund balance was lower than our beginning of the year, our actual budget. That's not a recipe for success. When I say a light at the end of the tunnel, and I grew up here, so I know what sunbreak means. And my wife, who was born and raised in the Southeast, understands. She didn't believe it when she said, when I told 65 degrees, it's going to feel like 85. Trust me. She's almost there, almost there. So if I think about these numbers, negative 1.3, negative 19.3, 4 years, 7.6 million and 1.91 million. What do those numbers mean? For those who can't read, I'm going to tell you, not can't read, can't see. Those who can't see this print, please keep in mind. When people say, Dr. Watts, we're running the organization to the ground. You caused this, and we don't believe you can get us out of this. These are the messages that we're hearing. And I tell people, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to show you, and you can draw your own conclusions. So fiscal year 16-17, 17-18, 18-19, and Dr. Harmon's going to share some information that will provide some greater context. But here's where we are today. Sometimes people ask, when they're sitting in the presidential seat, whether it's after their first or second campaign or after they're standing in front, and they ask this question: are we better off than we were 4 years ago? In some cases, we can say absolutely not, because we're always working to be better. 1.3, current year to date, we have spent 1.3% less than we did a year ago. That's an indicator of success. Reducing costs and reducing expenditures. 19.3, negative 19, current year to date. Our materials, supplies, and operating costs, otherwise known as our MSOC budget, we spent 19.3 less than we did last year. I'm not sure. There we go. So, first time in 4 years. Before that, 19.3%. Our material, supplies, and operating costs, they are less than they were a year ago. Now, keep in mind, our MSOC budget is 15% of our total budget. So we cannot go much higher than that, but we had to make some significant changes in our spending patterns. Why is that important? Because 4 years, for the first time in 4 years, this is significant. There is a pattern of fund balance. If you were to look at our pattern, you would see a mountain that has a peak and a valley at different points during the year. Peaks during property tax collection, twice per year, October and April. It's when the greatest numbers of revenue come to a school district. Absent of that are spending patterns. If there are rich spending going on in a district, we will see that our patterns, and that's how we end up with an operational deficit each year for the last 5 years, ending most recently at negative 5.6 million. Our fund balance by policy is supposed to end each year at 5% of our previous year's unencumbered general fund. That's the equivalent. Our budget, total budget, is about 360 million. So our end of year fund balance, keep this in mind, should be anywhere between 17 and 18 million. 7.6. For the first time in 4 years, our operational revenues are projected to exceed expenditures. Why is that important? In order for that factor that I just shared with you to take place, our operational revenues must exceed our expenditures. Remember, I shared with you over the last 5 years, they were not. 1.91 million. Anyone ever walked on a tightrope before? The margin for error is very slim. However, in order for us to get to the number 2, we have to get to number 1. In order for us to get to 17, we have to get to 5. In order for us to get out of this hole of a budget deficit, we have to get to a positive number. For the first time, we are projecting for the last 4, technically, 6 fiscal years, projected ending fund balance for August 2018, when this report was created, is 1.9 million. That's still much less. What did I say? What is our fund balance supposed to be? 5%, which is the equivalent of 17 to 18 million. 1.9 million. That is not where we need to be, and I am not proud to say we're here. However, I am letting you know that we can't get to 17 million until we get to 1.9. If we continue our patterns, the same patterns that we had continued over the last several years, by that meaning the last 5 to 6 fiscal years, and we did nothing, our end of year fund balance would be somewhere between $8 and $10 million deficit. Keeping track, that's a picture of photo of our newest school in Covington. We have another school, thankful to our November 2016 bond issue. Another elementary school that will be built in the Kent Valley. And we are scheduled to open within budget and on time the fall of 2018, Covington Elementary School, the newest version. Remember what I shared with you to recruit, hire, develop, and retain a diverse and premier workforce. We can't do this by ourselves, and this gives you a snapshot. 72% of the population are visual, so take a look. Team KSD, a little more than 3,000 employees. These are our employee groups. Our teachers are our most valuable resource, we know that. And research says it. Outside of the principal's a close second. Teacher, number 1, the most impactful person to improve outcomes for students. 49% of our population, our association members, our teachers, represented by KSD Blue. Our para-educators, those who support, 18%. Our admin assistants, 10%. Custodians and maintenance, 6%. Central office and district office, non-represented, 5%. Nutrition services, 4%. 3 and 3% for our bus drivers and principals and assistant principals, respectively, and 2% of our central office administrators. This is where we stand. This is the state of our district. We're not where we want to be. However, thank goodness we are not where we were a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 4 years ago. I will certainly take this time to ask questions and transition so that Dr. Harmon can set up her presentation. But I stand ready to answer any questions you may have at this time. No, transition. Questions? Transition. Yes.
Can you talk about the limitations you might have around additional fundraising? Like Seattle has a levy that helps to bolster some of the money that's done within the Seattle public school.
Yes.
There's been talk about levy swaps and other things that move money around. Can you talk about the capability of the Kent School District to raise additional revenue?
So the question is, how can we raise additional revenues that aren't tied to our revenue stream of federal dollars, local dollars, and state dollars. So state dollars are our bond resources. Those bonds are actually just like mortgages. We take out loans. And bonds, think about this, the B is for buildings. So typically bonds are like mortgages, and we have a bond issue to build school buildings or facilities. Levies are state dollars. Those are to support the resources that we are not fully funded to support, our educational programs. Some that people would say would be part of basic ed. That's 20% of our resources. And then of course, federal dollars. So there's been a levy cap and a levy swap. And what that means is that the dollars that we were able to capture through a levy, successful levy, we are no longer able to. The legislative officials created what is called now a levy swap, and legislation has a cap. We in Kent School District, we can run a levy based on this formula: $1.50 per student for every $1,000 of assessed value, or $2,500 per student, whichever is less. For us, that was $1.50 per $1,000 of assessed value. Now, equity and inequities, for those who are here and serving in school districts, understand this. You take Bellevue Public Schools and Kent School District. Here's the issue. About the same size, a little smaller Bellevue is, the reality is, and this is what makes it even more significant, because their assessed value and the property value is much higher than in Kent. Even with this cap, Kent School District, same formula, stands to earn $27 million less than Bellevue. Now, some would say, is that fair? I would say no. Is that equitable? I would say no. So let's talk about that. I know that Seattle Public Schools has a foundation where dollars and cents can be made. I am in conversations now, so I'll tell you this, humbled, honored by the support that has come in support of this work that we are leading in Kent School District. Aside from what may be heard in the general public, we are hearing that people want to help. And so there are corporations who are standing by. I have a meeting in May with, and I know this from my previous work, we can't do this by ourselves. In educational funding, we know people say full funding, fully funded. That's not the case, unfortunately. So we have needs. I haven't made those specific contacts yet, but the possibilities are there. We have a foundation that's now, it was not quite operational when I arrived, and I shared some of the examples of where I grew up professionally, 2,600 miles away in a school district, again, called Gwinnett County, 180,000 students, where each cluster of school or each strand had a foundation. And that didn't happen overnight. But those resources are available. And if there's any place in this country right now that has resources, I'm not asking for a handout. What I am saying is this is a time for hand up, so we can do this work and hold ourselves accountable. If there's any place that this could happen, it's the Pacific Northwest. Last time I heard, I think we do have a few people, we have a few extra dollars. I'm not saying that they need to spend it any way, but yes, that's our plan. If you have some specific names of individuals with whom I need to connect, please let me know.
So Dr. Watts, is your foundation fully operational?
No,
Oh.
it is.
What's keeping it from becoming operational?
When I say fully operational, I say structurally, yes. Do we have the resources to make a significant impact to programs or to people when a need arises? No.
No, I get that.
Okay.
Let me be very direct.
Please.
I'm the treasurer of a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
We have resources.
Yes.
The reason I'm here, and I've talked to Executive Director Smith,
Yes.
is to figure out how I can bring resources to bear specific to this purpose and intent.
Yes.
So that's why I asked you, do you have articles of incorporation? Do
Yes.
you have your 501c?
Yes.
C3?
Yes.
Do you have all your people in line? Do
Yes.
you have everything? Do you have everything that'll pass muster so that I can go back to my board and say, you know what, we want to put some money into it? That's it. That's basically the bottom.
Thank you for that operational definition of functional.
That'll be
So,
fun.
so when I say functional, in my mind, I'm saying we are operationally functional, that we have not only the systems in place, we have the resources to address any need we have. That part is not there yet. However, the functional, operate just simply functional. Do we have the systems in place? Yes, we do.
Excellent.
Yes, we do.
Get with you on that.
Please.
Start flowing the money.
Okay. I appreciate that. I have my cards. And if we have time, I did bring some Chick-fil-A cards for those who are answering some bonus questions later on if you pay attention. So, thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. About 10 more minutes, and if we are Okay. Couple more questions? Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
I got two quick.
Please.
One is what's the impact of the breakfast after the bell legislation? And the other is, how are you guys dealing with the proliferation of homeless kids and foster kids?
So question, breakfast after the bell. We've been in constant conversation with legislative officials. I happen to sit on United Way of King County's board, and we actually are now piloting some of the, what I would call the innovative practices for breakfast after the bell. Legislation that simply says, this is a brain that needs to be nourished. It's not. And we don't have employee groups who will help clean up, or there are systems in place that are serving as barriers. Those barriers can no longer be used as an excuse. We must find a way. So we have, did you know, there are resources now that are in 3 of our schools, or 2 middle schools?
So 2 middle schools.
2 middle schools, potentially one high school, that serve healthy meals in a vending machine that are hot breakfast choices, and they are filled on a regular basis to make sure that our students are coming to us with, obviously with nourished stomachs, so that their minds can think, their brains can operate effectively.
Through wonderful grant partnerships.
Thank you. And so United Way, providing amazing grant support. Again, we can't do this by ourselves. Second component in question was, remember, equity. Leadership is real easy when all resources are operating exactly as they should. Every student deserves to live in a warm, caring home environment, whatever that home may be. Some of our students, and I take no comfort again in understanding as many resources we have in this region, we have one of the highest, not only student, but family, statistically, one of the highest percentages of those who live in homeless situations. Now, I don't say homeless children, I don't say homeless families. They're not defined by that term. However, it is not, I'll just say, it's not right. And in that starting line, our students are put behind the starting line considerably when they're coming to us without those resources. So we provide additional resources to Kenny Vento, whether it's transportation. We have certainly connections with mental health agencies, foster care. We are doing our very best, and we also know that there is more work to be done. And Ray, and I think the gentleman here had a question as well. Yes.
So, Dr. Watts,
Yes.
a bit earlier in your presentation, you mentioned something to do with yourself and another African-American superintendent,
Yes.
and how one or the other of you either saw yourself in that other person?
Yes.
So, in thinking about that, so, okay, so seeing yourself so that you could imagine yourself being that superintendent, you remember that piece?
If I can't see me, how do I know I can be me?
Right. So, how does that particular scenario
Yes.
play out for our diverse students when we think about knowing, or when we know the fact that we need a more diverse workforce?
Yes.
So our students, our diverse students, are not seeing a diversity of themselves up in front of them in the classroom.
Yes.
If they're not seeing it, how do they know they can be it?
Yes. Yes. Ray, you are asking a question, and you're making a statement that drives the work of Goal 4. There's a reason why when you talk about building and creating a coherent organization, I probably wouldn't have written the script if someone said, how do you want your first 3 years of superintendency to go? That doesn't mean this isn't the right way, because there are conditions that we are now under in Kent School District that have compelled us to act differently, to be differently and be better. We have 4 strategic goals. We will have 4 communities, previously known as divisions. Why? Because we have to consolidate our resources. We have to broaden our strengths, and we have to make sure that our staff, we recruit across the country, but our resources did not enable us to fly to the southeast, because we know in the southeastern part of this country there is a higher percentage of African American educators. So you go where the numbers show. If we want a student or a staff who are speaking Spanish fluently, are not Latinx community, there's a higher percentage of those leaders who live in the Southwest. But we could not afford to continue that practice. The challenge, of course, when we recruit, because what is recruitment? It's telling you this is why you should be here, and we hope we can support you, we provide you support, then we develop you. And what's retention? Some would say that's trying to make sure they stay here. I call it micro-recruiting. Retention is really just recruiting every day. And I'm gonna tell you now, if I were trying to recruit my wife to come here, I had to make sure two things. A, she knew where to get her hair done, or realize that she had to change her hairstyle because she didn't want to pay $200 to get her hair done. Because where she grew up in Atlanta, you could get your hair done anywhere for $5, whether it was in your bathroom or down the street. And it was done well. We also had to find a place that sold grits. And I'm being very serious.
Yeah, where did you find that?
Safeway now has 2 brands. So we smile and we laugh and we understand that what happens. So I have a unit, a family unit. I grew up here, and there was still an adjustment when I came back to Noosa, because it was 21 years, and that's a lot of time. Imagine those teachers who come here without a family unit, not knowing anyone, and having experiences they grew up with. How welcoming are we? And what systems do we need to put in place? And we're working on that. A CARE team, that's in the works. CARE, standing for Kent, actively recruiting, retaining, and responding to employees. How do we make sure that at a Mariners game, when we had the Fab Four who came here, living in a home together, we were teachers, we recruited from University of Michigan or Michigan State, one of the two. And the vast majority of them were teachers of color. They were able to live together. They stayed for 2 years, and they went back. One of the events that they appreciated, they told us, we had a Mariners game, and the Mariners were playing Detroit Tigers, and we made sure they had a place where they could actually feel like they had a little bit of home. That was impactful. It wasn't enough. But we have to be thinking in that way, because the world, yes, as large as it is, we have to make it smaller. Those are some of the examples, because we can't just say, come on, join us. And hear me when I say this. So I have a unique perspective. I grew up here, and there was many times when my parents told me, sometimes you might be the only, whatever that only is. Whatever it is, be the best you can be. Don't compare yourself to anyone. Be the best you can be. Then you can worry about comparing yourself to others. And then I went to Howard, and I saw people who looked exactly like me who were doing the work. And then I was at Reed, and I saw people who didn't look like me and were thinking differently. And then I moved to the Southeast. And again, I saw people who looked like me and were doing the work. But hear me when I say this. When I say part of our equity work, I don't have to look like you to be your advocate. However, if I don't see images of me, how will I truly know I can be me? There are examples, and I can tell you now, we lived in a school district where 95% of the student population was African American. And about 95% of the staff population was African American. So when I ask people, okay, what's your assumption? And if your assumption is, if I look like you, then I'm going to treat you exactly like I know, and I'm going to tell you this, I've lived this. That is not always the case. You're not hearing me say that it's never the case, but I want us to be mindful of race matters. I understand that. I know it. I've lived it. I live it. And because you don't look like me, that is not an excuse. And because you look like me, that should never be an assumption that we are going to treat each other. So this is a relationship, that micro-recruiting, every opportunity. When I say this, and I will transition to Dr. Harmon with this, every opportunity to communicate. Today, one-on-one. I'm meeting with families and community members who are at odds, who have concerns. Come meet with me. You can put it on social media, or you can get a solution and meet with me. I may not give you the answer you're looking for, I'm going to tell you the truth. But if we don't have those opportunities for conversations, that social contract, every time I communicate. So every time you communicate with someone today, think about this. You have the opportunity to strengthen or to weaken that relationship. The choice is yours. I choose this opportunity every day. And it's not always the way in which I envision it. But we have moved much further in less than, I feel like I've been here longer than 3 years. We've moved much further than I think people would have imagined. We have a long way to go. There's some context, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share this with you. Our next board meeting, and they've become must-see TV as of late. Be careful what you ask for. We have board members who say, you know what, I wish people would show up. Board meetings, we had more staff over there a year ago. More staff, they were pretty boring and no one came to the meetings. And then opportunity, and that's the way I see it. This is an opportunity. This is not a problem. It is an opportunity for us to solve and improve. April 25th, we have a work session. It will be a different work session. It will be a work session very similar to what you're seeing now. It will be an informational work session where we'll be on the floor, down on the dais, and we'll have individuals there, and there may be time for questions, limited times, and we'll recess into an executive session, and the regular meeting begins at 7. April 25th, Kent School District School Board of Education. In the boardroom, I would say, just like for those who worship and do so in a faith-based organization that recognizes Easter. Overflow. We have an overflow now. We have 2 rooms and cameras. That's our new reality. So get there early if you want to be a part of this. And I say be a part of this, not this issue. Be a part of this. I grew up here a long time ago, and I knew people. I graduated from high school, people who worked for the small startup company called Microsoft. And they weren't making any money. They were being paid stock options. And they were able to retire about 20 years ago. But I tell people this when they say, why should we come to Kent? We are assembling a mighty team right now of leaders who understand the work. Why Kent? I would say the same thing. Why wouldn't you have invested in Microsoft at an early age, at an early stage? That said, I want to thank you, humbled by your attentiveness, your engagement, and your leadership. It does matter. I know I stand here in front of you on the shoulders of giants. I thank you for all that you've done. I'm going to, yes, it will be the lightning round, speed round of information that Dr. Harmon is going to share with you from an organizational effectiveness standpoint. Dr. Harmon, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you.
So I am going to very quickly answer a couple of questions that have been living in our social media, living on our district website, living in communications in our emails, and just general wonderings. So, been dealing a lot with budget, and my day-to-day work allows me to be the executive level support for our finance team, not the day-to-day support. So there are people who are doing that work, who that's their life work and passion. They are professionals in that. They went to school for that. They are doing that. But my role at the executive level is to help make that clear to others because it's very complex. But there have been several questions that I've asked, kind of 3 big ones. So, who did it? Where did it go? When did you know? Are the 3 big questions. And that's part of what we're going to talk about April 25th. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it today, but I want you to know. And I'd like feedback on, does this help understand and give the clarity of who's responsible? Where did the money go? Because the money is gone. There's no debating that. And when did we know? So to lay it out there first, these are all public documents on board docs. So that's where we keep all of our archived information about our school board and their operations. May 6, 2015 is when the board and the interim superintendent at the time started the process to plan and finalize the 15-16 school year budget. That's the most significant piece of this, but these are the minutes from that meeting saying that they were doing budget planning. June 3rd, next opportunity that same group gets together, board, interim superintendent, to finalize planning for 15-16 budget. These are the minutes and documentation from the gap contract that was done for Dr. Watts, because his contract didn't start until July 1 of 2015. This contract fills the gap between June 15th and June 30th until his full contract begins. In August of 2015, the 15-16 budget is adopted by a superintendent that is 2 months into his work, and a board, and a budget that was planned by an interim superintendent and a board. We're going to skip through these. We'll go over these in detail. It really lays out the actuals and when the district knew. These are also on board docs. They are state documents that go through the district's actual balance and their perceived and planned and forecasted balance as we move forward. But what we see here when we start is that if there was a point in time in 12-13 when they were planning the fiscal year 14-15, the most recent actuals they had were from 12-13. So when Dr. Watts and others have talked about the complexity of budgeting and how you do your accounting, actuals are actually 1.5 to 2 years behind your actual spending when those books have been audited, closed out, and done. And so when we start to ask the when did we know, they're planning 14-15 and living that and just finding out what 12-13 really looked like in August of 2014. And so that's helping people understand the timeline of how that plays out. We're not going to go through all of these. We don't have time for that. The other piece of this that I really want to help people understand is, well, where did the money go? This is the 14-15 budget. The last budget under previous superintendency. They start planning out where they're going next. So if you scroll up. This is page 6 of that budget document. It says that Governor Inslee directs state agencies to identify 15% cuts. So they're laying a case in their budget for what they plan to do for the 14-15 school year.
Before you move on, are you making reference to the state's biennial budget and the governor instructing the state legislature with respect to the educational side of the budget that there's a 15% budget cut?
So making it.
Because this is not Inslee telling the Kent School District.
No, it's not. No, it's making a statement about the fiscal state of the state as a whole.
You need to make that clear.
Okay.
Because that's why I'm bringing it back.
Oh, okay. So
I get it.
Right.
I know the
So,
state budget.
right.
I know
So,
this stuff.
right. So this is
You
fiscal.
make it
Right.
clear
So
when
this
you're
is.
talking to people
this is-
that this was the state
Yes.
of.
This is the state of where the state
Yes.
was. So keeping in mind that what Dr. Watt shared with us earlier is that the bulk of the funding for a school district comes from state funding.
Yes.
And so if senior leadership at the state level is saying the state is having trouble and here's where we're going moving forward, 15% cuts. For 14-15, Kent School District plans out 68.5 FTE. Now, it's another complicated piece of this. You don't think about people being half of people, quarters of people, tenth of people, but it's about the work hours. So 68.5 full-time equivalents in one piece for school guidance counselors, AVID, some other things up there, but they're all instructional pieces. Here, administrative central admin positions, approximately 8.5 positions, 77.1 restorations paid, planned for their 14-15. And then an additional set of new positions, 43 new program people positions, an additional 10 clerical staff, support staff positions, approximately 128 additional FTE planned for 14-15. What we typically say when we do budget, we estimate the full cost of an employee, including benefits, it's approximately $100,000 per person. So we're talking about roughly $12.8 million. There's our estimated ending fund balance at the time, a little over $15 million, $6,990 as they get ready to plan for 15-16. Interim superintendent and the board at the time go into planning an additional $23.5 million in funding for new expenditures, expansions of programs and people. Cost of living increases, those are good things for all employee groups. Additional planning days for our teachers, class size reductions, inflationary and growth considerations, an additional almost $3.7 million for program expansions, added mental health, textbook adoptions, professional development for teachers around English language arts, middle school boy and girl soccer programs, athletic utility pieces. All of those are great things. $3.7 million. Recommended new expenditures by superintendent, $500,000. So we have 12.8, 14, 15, and an additional 28 million in 15, 16. The piece that's hidden in all of these great things that happen, especially when you talk about people, is that they're exponential costs. So every position you add isn't just 100,000 in a single year. It is the cost of inflationary costs for cost of living, step increases, and all of those pieces. So every person in the following year typically adds between $8,000 to $10,000, depending on their role in the district, on top of the base from the prior year. So when people ask, where did the money go? It's laid out in board docs. It's laid out in our budget plan. It was spent with community support, with board support, in front of everyone's eyes, on things that were great to do, but not sustainable. Because as we moved into 16-17, this is the 15-16 budget plan, it was $15.2 million in general fund revenue would exist, and 1.04 in unassigned monies still existed. But we know that we don't get actuals until a year and a half later. So you can't really lay out and know with certainty what's happening and where that money's spent and the true cost of it until you start to hit 16-17. And that's where we see that there's a significant shift in spending. 1.8 is the cost of living increase, salary and step only. 20 FTE added due to enrollment. Assistant principals in Title I elementary schools, paraeducators, textbook adoption, SAT, technology licenses, administrative positions. And then keeping in mind our negotiations for our remaining labor partners. So the expansions don't show up anymore. And then we know what happened 16-17 moving forward as we move into the 17-18 budget. All of that stuff. So when people ask where the money went, it's very clear. Our audit reports lay out there. The district started to be informed 14-15 that they were in solid standing, having 6.3% of their general fund. Based on audit reports from the state auditor that comes in every year to audit every district's funding and spending. When they came in to audit the 14-15 school year in April 2016, at the end of the 14-15 school year, Kent School District was already out of compliance with their minimum fund balance. In the auditor's report, in the highlighted area, they were already out of compliance at the end of 14-15. They were at 3.64% based on the state auditor's report. So someone knew that we were starting to head down a path of behavior, a pattern of spending that was out of sorts. Not out of compliance with any directive, not that we weren't making good decisions for kids, but we were clearly making unsustainable promises. When we go into the audit of 15-16, shared in April of 2017, this is the point that we knew with certainty and with clarity that there was a real problem. Problem is, the train had already left the station. train left the station 3 years ago, 3 years ago. But what does the auditor tell us here? At the end of 15-16, we have an unassigned fund balance of less than $0.01 billion. Less than a full percent of our ending fund balance. So when did we know? With certainty, with clarity, with authority? April of 2017. From an outside source. So no mistaking what internal people are doing with the math or any of that. The state came in and said, here you know. But we knew the year before. The problem is that the plan had already happened and all the pieces were put in place. People were already hired, buildings were already staffed, programs were already running. And so that brings us to today and where we are and the things that we need to do to move forward. So in April, April 25th, Dr. Watson said we're going to go through this more in detail and have the opportunity to ask some questions there. I'll be around for a few minutes. It's always great being between people at lunch. Back to you.
There's a lot of information to take in and a variety of things. But trying to get at least some kind of handle on understanding budgets and the impact on delivery of education is quite important. That's why we want to spend time today. So thank you, Dr. Watts. Thank you for coming up and helping us get some information around this. Again, the 25th, as just being stated, they're going to be going into more detail around this. So even if you're not in Kent, coming there will give you some insight in what's happening and understand what things are going on, because school districts right now are building their budgets for this next year. And that's why later this afternoon, Dr. Jackson is going to be taking us through some more information around budget building, so we all have a better handle on understanding this coming.
And just for context, since there are people here from a number of different school districts around the state, is there anything special about Kent having to rely on trailing financial information?
No, so what's interesting about this, so the timeline that happens is the same for everyone. It is budget season for every school district. Their actuals come in at the same time as so it is always a lag when your actuals and your books are closed. They never close. In planning coming up, you're always living in forecast when you make your next budget plan. The audit reports happen, I am sure. There's an audit team sent by OSPI in every school district, and they make their rounds, and that happens when they audit the previous school year's books and close them in the spring. So they just closed out our audit report this past week in April. So every spring, school districts will receive those audit reports. So the timelines are the same no matter what district you're in. So that's not unique. It is the decisions that were made that make us unique.
Absolutely. And I think if there's nothing to, or if there's one thing to take away, is that budgeting, similar to our home budgets, it is about revenues and expenditures. However, what's different is that an educational funding budget process is truly a multi-year process. Our process involves preparing, planning budget, developing budget, implementing, which we are in the process of planning now, implementing for, remember, this is 17-18, we are getting ready to propose what year's budget, what fiscal year? 18-19. That's not intuitive for everyone when we see those numbers, because people, I told you, you've been here for this long. 18-19, so it's a multi-year process, implementation, and then evaluation. That's what we're doing now for our previous fiscal years. We're evaluating and we're finding out what we don't need to do again.